because Kheng didn't open himself, I'll just introduce this is Kheng. She's the artist in residence alongside Laura through the process. And as Laura mentioned, we do have the two current residents have started, and I do encourage you to peek into their studios to see what they're up to. And the way that we currently have it structured so that we can kind of have the artists in residence for a amount of time and then have the show open while they're still in residence. But then it overlaps with the next resident. It's a little bit of a way to kind of relieve the pressure of the current artist in residence because there's artwork up from the previous residents that while they kind of get traction and get started. And also we planned these talks a few weeks after these residents have ended, which also gives them a chance then to kind of serendipitously, the way it worked out, to have a little bit of a breather before they come back and have a little bit of hindsight about the work. So I really appreciate that both of them were able to do this today. And okay, Lynn, everybody.
Hi everyone.
Hi.
I'm just gonna put a little timer. I don't like to talk for too long. Well, I guess I'm gonna do it a little different from Laura. I'm not gonna have a single image of my work up here. I mean, they're on the walls. But I'd like to talk about and share my background and things that have been on my mind a lot. And feel free to have any questions and comments at any time. I would like this to be more of a sharing than just me kind of giving a lecture. So a little bit about me. My name is Kheng, and I'm from Malaysia. I'm of Chinese descent, so my grandparents, they escaped. They could see like what's going on in China during the 20s. You know, it was a very tumultuous time. So a lot of the people from China left, and they went to the United States and through all of Southeast Asia. And so my grandparents on both sides had settled in Malaysia. And I grew up there, and then I came here in 2013 for school at BYU. And I've stayed ever since. So this is a little of how home would look like. This is a very, very typical street in Malaysia, and it's very crowded, and food is a huge part of the culture. And so you see, tables on the streets and chairs, and we are supposed to get your food and sit out by the streets, and cars and people and bikes, motorcycles would just be. It's a very kind of dense, busy, semi-chaotic place to be. And this is where I come from, and it's gonna play into where I'll go later on. So I grew up, it's a funny mix of Taoism and Buddhism. So Buddhism is more of a kind of a philosophy. Taoism is a mix of everything else, right? You have 10,000 gods, and you have all sorts of stories, all sorts of myths and superstitions, and people being what they are, they just kind of mix the two together. So it's kind of a unique, not a unique, but it's a very interesting thing. And so we have this thing we call it Qingming, which is kind of like the Day of the Dead every year. So April 6th, that's also my birthday. So we would visit my grandparents' cemetery. We would go home and celebrate my birthday, right? But we would go to this temple, and it's a pretty special temple because you can see that there are mountains right in the background, right? And so what they did was they found these big old limestone caves, and they converted it into kind of a temple. So and caves kind of, a lot of different cultures, caves are kind of like conduits to another world. And so as a kid, it's always fun to go to these temples and just to look inside. This is the one that I would go to every year as a kid. And so you see Buddha right there, and then on the side you see all sorts of different kinds of gods. And I mean, as a 5-year-old kid, you walk in there and it's dark, and the ceilings have bats on it, and you see these figures, and especially the ones on on the right, scary looking dudes. It was always a mixture of fascination and a lot of fear. Scary. And here's another one. I mean, look at that. It's scary. But my parents and my aunts, they will go and they will do their rituals. You know, they will light their incense and they'll pray and they'll offer up food. They'll offer up meat, fish, cakes, rice, and all of that kind of stuff. They put it right there. And I would stay out of the temple as much as I can, because you could see from this picture that it's very smoky. And so as maybe my eyes are a little bit more sensitive, I will go in and within a few minutes I'll be tearing up and I'll just be rubbing my eyes the whole time. But they will ask me to come in, they'll give me my incense, they'll tell me what to say, and I'll do exactly as they tell me. And once I'm done, I'm out, right? And so it's one of these times that I went out and my family is still in there doing their offerings, and I just wanted to explore the area. And again, this is all built into a complex of caves. And there was a little clearing, like it's almost like a little hole, it's a big hole, and so there's sky, right? And I will walk behind, and that's behind this particular temple. I will walk behind it, and there was this one time there were little semi-open buildings, no roofs, just 3 walls, and there were a lot of things burning inside. And so I got really curious, and I wanted to walk and see what they are burning, because we would burn all sorts of stuff: paper money, paper cars, because supposedly they would get it, right? We burn it and they would get it. So we would buy chests, like gold ingots, money, and everyone is rich there. Inflation is crazy, right? Like all the bills are like $1 trillion, and so what does a dollar mean? But we would burn them. But I saw these were extra large compartments for burning, and so I would go in, and then I would see black things in the burning, and then I saw what looked like feet. And so they were cremating people, right, in the open. And so I was probably 6 or 7. And so I saw that, and I knew I shouldn't have gone there. I knew I shouldn't have gone there. And so I ran back out. I couldn't tell my parents what I saw because I would be in trouble. But I mean, I needed to process that, right? I just saw someone being burned, and I was a little kid, but I couldn't tell anybody, and so I just had to think about it. And so this is one of a few early experiences in my life that kind of introduced me to the idea of, first of all, death. Second of all, decay, the impermanence of everything. You know, like things come, things go. Another thing that really struck me as a kid were these incense. These are incense, and you know, we are used to incense being a little like a chopstick kind of thing, but these are huge. These are huge. I'm looking at it, it's probably like 15, 16 feet tall. And these are kind of half burned too, right? And so for a kid, it might as well be a 50-foot tall, basically a burning tree trunk. And I remember going close to these things, and I could hear it burn. Again, there's this element of fear and this fascination with all these things. And man, I mean, the religions there are so brutal. I think brutality is the one word I could use for it. And if you look at some of my paintings, I mean, a lot of them have rods, or even like maybe columns, or maybe even a chimney. There's one that I painted, the chimney is not here anymore, but throughout my whole life since my childhood, I've always come back to these things. In fact, I try to turn away from it because I think, man, I'm just painting little sticks the whole time. But I come back to it. And no matter, like, I try to, go away from it and find different forms to be more interesting, to be new, but it felt artificial. And then when I come back to these images, it felt real. It felt like I was connecting to something. And so, like, my themes are chaos and order. I find incense burning very interesting and complicated and varied in its concepts, because what we are doing, we're taking wood, we're grinding it into a dust, right? We're packing it back together, and then we are burning it. So basically, we're turning trees into smoke, right? Which is chaos. If you think about it, it's all chaos. We're just producing more chaos than before. But the people who believe in these religions, they burn it with the intent of sending their prayers to heaven, asking the gods to help them preserve the life they want, which is to create kind of an order. I remember before my big exams, my parents would take me to these temples and they would burn all this incense. They want me to do well in my exams. And it's a very interesting thing, like we are aware, even subconsciously, every day, that something is always decaying. And so we do things every day to kind of stave off the decay, to push it away, to preserve what we love and we know, right? I mean, think about it. Like, what did we do today before we arrived? We woke up, we brushed our teeth, we showered, we put on our clothes. I went to the gym. What is all this for? It is an effort to keep that thing away, right? That nameless thing that eventually will come, right? I mean, I'm in my 30s and I'm realizing, like, if I don't exercise regularly, my body just kind of goes down. In my 20s, I could sleep at 2, wake up at 8, and go to classes, no problem. Now, if I get 7 hours, I feel it the rest of the day, right? It's there. And so I try my best. I eat the right things, I try to sleep at least 8 hours, and I try to exercise, and I try to take care of myself so that I can preserve this window of time as long as possible before the inevitable sets in, right? And so, I don't know, it's like, for example, this morning, like I said, I went to the gym, and it was, and there was this worker that's kind of sweeping the floor, right? This would be a little gross, maybe. Sweeping the mats. It's like a martial arts kind of area. So there's a lot of people doing their thing, and so she's just sweeping the mats, and there's this pile of gray dust, right? What is that?
Skin.
Yeah, it's skin. It's literally like dust kind of just falling off, right? and then on the drive, I live in Provo, so I pass by the Provo temple on the way here, and I see families gathering. People Saturdays, during the spring is when people get married, and so like you see this time of generation. Like families coming together, eventually there's going to be a little baby. It's a creation. And I think because of what's happened to me in the past, my experiences in the past, that I'm very aware of like these two things. There's always going to be generation, there's always going to be degeneration. And in my paintings, I try to show that. I do a lot of like straights and a lot of right angles, always. A lot of it is like, because the right angle, it's the order, it's the control, like I like to do woodworking. I make picture frames as a business. And the most important thing is to make sure that it's square. If it's not square, everything looks horrible. And so there's that control right there that I gotta get it as close to 90, which is never achievable, by the way. I mean, you could, I've tried, I looked at precision instruments that are thousands of dollars, and they could get to within 6 decimal points of 90, but they could never get to exact 90. Because even changes in the temperature will move the metal, and they will put it out of square. It's crazy, but we try our very best. We try our very best to get to it, right? And so, where was I going? Oh, so yeah, so I have squares, right angles, but they're also in very ambiguous spaces. Like these are all spaces. So you know, like I grew up in this, and then I came to Utah for grad school, and I see this, right? I remember drawing into the salt flats for the very first time, and it was actually a little scary. Scary because I had no references, or I didn't know how far or how near the thing was. I remember walking out, and I saw a little rock somewhere off the distance, and it's the only feature. And so I walked towards it, and I was walking probably for 3, 4, 5 minutes, and it didn't seem to get any closer. You know, I just kept walking and walking and walking until I really got to it, and it wasn't a rock. It was an owl who, you know, that died, and then the salt just kind of formed over it. And so it's like, so I don't know what's what anymore, and I don't know how far or near a thing is. There's no safety, there's no room to tell me where I am. And so my paintings are the same. It's fields of space that doesn't quite tell you where it ends. You know, during the Romantic era, like time of Beethoven, you have a lot of like philosophers who talked about the sublime. I used to think that the sublime and the divine are the same thing. Sublime, divine, the same thing. The sublime, according to them, is that experience of something that is so powerful and so far beyond you that it creates in you a feeling of awe and a feeling of terror, because it's so out of your control. And like William Turner, the guy who painted ships and the ocean and light, I mean, this is one of his, right? And artists during that time, they wanted to capture that feeling of the sublime, that power that is so far beyond your control that all you could do is to experience it and get taken along for that ride. There's nothing you could do to resist it. And I feel like this thing, this chaos that we're fighting against every day is kind of like that force that no matter what you do, it just goes. And there's a scientific theory. It's called the heat death of the universe. We don't know if it's true, but likely it could be true. Where eventually the universe is going to keep expanding. Everything is going to start breaking down. The molecules is going to start breaking down. Until eventually the whole universe is just this uniform soup of molecules. And the distance between each molecule will be millions and millions of light years away from each other. And it's all going to be just right there. A state of total equilibrium where there's no imbalance of forces that could produce anything new. It's like static on your TV, you know? It's all completely even, random, and that's the death of the universe. That could be the fate of everything that we have. However, if you think about the lifespan of the whatever molecule it is, right? It was created maybe 15 billion years ago. It's floating in the universe, no friends, And then for some reason it bumped into the next atom. And that bumped into another atom, and then it created enough mass to kind of attract more because of gravity. And then it formed the solar system, and then it formed the planets. And some very, very lucky atoms got formed into a human body. And so for that split second, for the next 80 years, that atom is having the time of his life. Like just doing things, creating, living, And then once the person dies, it gets recycled a few times, and then it gets thrown back out. When the earth dies, it gets thrown back out into nothing. And so as far as that one atom goes, like the highlight is right now, right? And so even chaos, it could be very nihilistic. But if you look at it too, like, this is it. This is like the party. This is the focal point on basically the existence of that one thing. And we're doing our best to preserve it. It's quite amazing. It's a very heroic thing if you think about it, even daily life. I say this a few times, that you just wake up, you look out, it's nice, it's sunny, things are going well, but the thing about it, so much could go wrong. So much could go wrong. But it's okay, like everything is right now. And there's something really magical about that. And I think even making art and making paintings, it's my way to kind of acknowledge that, and my way to kind of work through that. I don't know. It's yeah.
So, would you say that you ever got over your initial fears that you were feeling that you, as a child, or are you still dealing with that?
I think I have a fear of that. Like I'm very aware of potential losses. It's crazy. Like so my ex-wife and took our daughter to visit the grandparents for a few weeks. You know what's the first thing that I thought of? Car crash. Yeah. That's the first thing I thought of. Isn't it crazy?
Yeah.
It's crazy.
Do you think that stems from that
fear of loss?
But the fear that you spoke about when you were a child, do you think that's where it all came from?
A lot of it came from that, I think.
There's fear.
That just knowing that your body is a piece of meat and you're gonna just die.
Oh, and like the cremation thing that you
Yes.
saw.
Yes.
And you couldn't speak about it, but
I couldn't. I mean, I was terrified.
yeah.
And there was another time too. This is kind of crazy. Like I wonder what my mom was thinking. I was playing in the bushes, and she was telling me not to play in the bushes, not to play in the bushes. But I was a kid. I was curious. I played in the bushes, and I got poked with a syringe, like a needle, in the bushes. Right? Told my mom about it. My mom, first thing she said, well, that's what you get. Now you're gonna get AIDS and die. and so I went home. I was a little boy. There was no internet, so I had to go to my encyclopedia books and look up AIDS. And say, well, I saw like you could die in 6 months, or the virus could be dormant for 20 years before it. And so, I looked at that and okay, I had to make peace. Like I could die, or I could live to my 20s and then just die, But I wonder what my mom was thinking. I never spoke to her about it. There's no use now. It's in the past, but it just kind of, yeah. So these are some of the things that. And so, is it a fear? I think it's a very acute recognition, but because of that, it made me really appreciate almost everything.
When things are
there are
going
times
right.
I take things for granted, but generally speaking, I'm very appreciative of whatever I'm experiencing. Yeah. So that's it. That's the last slide. So yeah, I mean, painting and why do I paint? it's for me to, in a way, celebrate. Like, okay, everything is well enough that I can have the luxury of making art. And I'm gonna talk about these deep feelings I have about my art. And it's a happy thing. And I'll do it as long as I can. And I'll do everything to make that as long as I can, you know? So, yeah. And if there's any other questions, I'll happily answer them, but that's my...
I think it's interesting that you were born on All Souls Day. I mean, and that's like recognizing the souls that have passed as well as bringing new life into the planet. And those two things seem to be in your life every day.
Yeah. It's even as a kid, I could see the contradiction. We would, we pray to my grandparents. We pray to them. We give them food. We would make a whole meal with chicken, and it's a banquet. We put there, and we'll leave. We'll go home, and then we'll cut my cake. It's so weird, and my parents would always laugh about it. You were born on All Souls Day. Yeah, so contradictions.
Yes.
But it's good. It's a very interesting way to kind of, and it's a real way of seeing the world. Like there is death, but there is a lot of life too.
But the Buddhist religion is all about impermanence and basically preparing for death, I think. Which we don't do in our society at all.
It's very rare. And religion life is so uncertain, and religion gives us that kind of certainty, which is good, but could also be a little dangerous because there's too much certainty.
Yeah.
You don't feel the need to learn or to change or to modify. Yeah.
Well, I mean, even though you didn't really talk in too much in terms of your work, I just feel like I learned so much about your paintings from what you just shared with us. My first response to seeing your work is I saw screens and like barriers.
Yeah.
And one thing I really love about your work is these teeny little moments. Like Kheng will sort of make these like corners, like they're tiny little moments in the paintings that are really, really magical. But then also just sort of insights from your talk is all the, sort of totems, these sticks you have, like the incense, and so it's really interesting to see these sort of chaotic city images of Malaysia, and then see your work, which is not chaotic at all, but how there's that connection. It's really, I mean, thank you for sharing today, because I feel like I've learned a lot.
It's helpful to know your story and see your work and be able to interpret it, not only perhaps, me interpreting what you've said, but then also take what you've said and interpret it in life.
Yeah.
It feels like you couldn't not make these paintings.
Yeah.
Like it's a way for you to be calm with it all.
Yeah, I mean, I have kind of a basic. I have my daughter to take care of. I have a business to run, but despite that, I have to make the paintings. It happens.
Because you're calling.
Yeah.
So I just have to ask, I'm so curious now. When you first moved to this area, you talked about being out in the salt flats and everything, but what do you think of it here now?
I love this place.
So it's grown on you?
Oh yeah. I mean, I tell my friends that Malaysia, it's really just food and family. In that order.
Well, I hope you still get food here.
Yeah,
And
yeah, but not. I mean,
not like
there's nowhere. I don't think there's anywhere in the world that could compete with in terms of food. And if you're ever thinking of traveling, go to Thailand and Malaysia, and you could get a melting pot like nothing else, and you can get all the resorts where you can get like that. I love Utah.
Do you? What do you love about it?
It's just more open, and life is easier. A lot easier. Life is hard back home. But too much. So there's so much competition, and it's packed. So you could imagine like you know, if I'm an introvert and I like space, and so it's always kind of man. There are times back home I would just go into the bathroom, close the door, and put on my
Kind of get away from
get away.
the chaos.
Yeah, but here it's easy. You go hiking and
Well, I see that in your paintings, like it's spacious.
yeah.
There's lots of.
Yeah, and so like for example, driving across Nevada, you know, going to the Southwest, man, it's crazy. There was one time I was driving in Nevada, and I just let go of the steering wheel, and I timed myself. There was no cars. It was like, I think it was 3 minutes. 3 minutes, I could just let go, and it would just go straight. Crazy.
So you like that?
Oh yeah. I mean, I would, and you know, like a lot of these roads are public lands, and so that they always have this fence. Man, but then if there's no fence, I would just stop my car and just walk out and see how far I can go. You know, and if you go to Google Maps, which is interesting, you go and explore, you see like I'm in the mountains. There's like an installation. Has to, I mean, and I'm guessing it's probably like missile silos and all of that kind of military stuff, you know. But man, the secrets that are hidden in the plains and mountains, it's so interesting. Yeah. Well, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you all so much for being here for these talks. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. We have, I think some of you have already taken time to look at the work downstairs, but we just finished installing the newest show. It'll officially open on Friday, so we'll have a reception from 6 to 8 to celebrate You May Find Yourself, which is the 7 artists highlighted downstairs. So thank you so much. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to us. And otherwise, I guess now's a chance to corner the artist and ask questions you didn't ask publicly, and see the rest of the books and the art and everything else we have to offer.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you so much.
Yeah.